Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to attempt to, in the place of our normal classroom time, I'm going to attempt to video record lectures, and then post those in Moodle so that you can watch them, at your convenience. Although I'm going to get to some specific points here to get us a little bit oriented in this first video lecture. And you see here that this first point that I have listed is that I plan to follow the in-class format as much as possible, meaning that I'll have these little video lectures with the use of PowerPoints and go over the most important points from each chapter. We'll continue to kind of follow the schedule in the syllabus, although we're currently behind a little bit, but we'll see if we can catch up. And I'll keep you folks oriented about when the next test is coming, or which chapter we're covering this week, or chapters we're covering this week, all that kind of stuff. So I'll use both the video lectures and also emails, announcements through Moodle to keep you folks up on dates, what's coming, what's expected, and assignments, all that kind of thing. As you see here, so the second point that I've got written up here is to email me any questions you have. If I'm giving a video lecture and you're puzzled about something, please email me. I'll get right back to you. And if it's something that applies to most everyone in the class, then I'll post the question and the answer in the announcements in Moodle so that everybody can see the answer, and I'll pick those things that I think would be relevant to a lot of people. If it's more individual, I'll just email you back as soon as I can get to that. Number 3 I've got here is that I'm in the process of putting exams online, and so again, I want to follow the in-class format as much as we can, where we'll have a day that like between this time and this time, you need to get online, take the test. The test will have a certain number of minutes to complete the test. It's like in class, it's closed book, closed note, and I'll give the more details on that when we get closer to the next exam. And so we'll have reviews just like we have previously. I'll have a video lecture that will be your review and help you get ready for the test. But that we will be having those have you take those exams online. So more on that later. Number 4 here, that papers will be submitted through email, and for the case study analytical papers. And so soon I'll make an assignment for the next paper. And speaking of that, you folks want to get to me this last assignment. You want to get that to me by via email by Wednesday, and I'll send out something on email, something on that as a reminder to everybody. The number 5 here, video lectures are going to be, again, sort of mimicking what we do in the classroom, so they're going to be important for testing. I've already said before that compared to other classes that I teach, that this class it's really important to take notes on what I say during lectures, because it goes well beyond the textbook, and I kind of bring in quite a bit of my own points, research knowledge into that, in addition to the textbook. So it's important to listen carefully to these lectures. I think it makes sense to take notes while you're watching them, or possibly to watch them more than once. And the idea is that you'll watch these videos close to the time that will be that we normally would be giving the class. But there's, of course, more flexibility when we have these video lectures posted online, that you can watch them at your convenience. But still, I'm going to try to follow the pace and the schedule as if the class was in the classroom and was a normal situation. So I will, in addition to having these video lectures, and the video lectures will be they'll be shorter than, they'll be pieces, so they won't be, the full class period. They won't be that long. They'll be broken up into parts. And so that's one thing is to keep in mind that they'll be labeled as being in various, lecture, chapter 9, part 1, that kind of thing. But I'll send out emails often to reinforce what's being said in the video lectures, and if there's anything that news, anything that I didn't talk about in the lectures, make sure I get that out to you. So you should watch for those emails closely and try to follow up on that. Another example of something I'd email about when I get this extra credit opportunity finished, this online survey that you and your friends can participate in, email out something on that and instructions about that kind of thing. So watch your emails consistently so that you're up on everything. And so I think that's all for the instructional stuff that I wanted to do at this moment. But I did want to get in this first little section from this next chapter that we're going to cover, and the highlighted points for that. And so I'm going to switch over here to my PowerPoint notes, and we have here the beginning of chapter 9 and the highlighted PowerPoint notes for that. So I want to get into that and spend a few minutes on that, and then again we'll break this chapter up into parts and proceed like that. And you'll see several links for each chapter in Moodle there, links to these video lectures. Let's see, so maybe we could go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint slide so it's in slideshow form. And let me begin with this first point, that one criticism of traditional sociological criminology, the criminology that comes out of our discipline of sociology, is that individual differences are ignored. And what we mean by individual differences, this has a sort of technical meaning in psychology and related disciplines. This idea of internal traits. Most of the theories that we have covered this semester have focused on circumstances that a person is in that may push or pull that person towards criminal behavior. So poverty, a dysfunctional home life, delinquent friends, that these sort of things pull you towards crime. And they're things that you find in your environment, things that are around you. And that's really, generally speaking, sociology's approach. That sociology looks at people as being sort of influenced a great deal by their surroundings. And why do they do what they do? They do it because they're getting pushed and pulled in different directions. Think of like a pawn on a chessboard being moved. Wherever you end up is because you got put there by something. Well, a criticism that comes from a certain school in psychology that's very much connected, rooted in biology, like a biological psychology, criticizes that point by saying that you're missing a big part of the picture if you only look at the outside of a person and look at them as say a puppet who's getting pulled by strings, and to ignore the inside of a person. The idea that a person's, and really when we say inside, specifically what we're talking about is the brain, because the brain is the organ in charge of your behavior. And so the criticism is that if we don't look at a person's internal traits, the way that their brain operates, that we're missing a big part of what it is to be a human being and to be able to explain a person's behavior. So we move now into this next section of the course, into a focus on the internal traits, on the inside of a person, specifically the brain, and how that and theories connected to that, theories that would explain behavior by focusing on internal traits. Personality psychology is an important discipline that's in this area of individual differences. And what we mean when we say personality is we're talking about characteristics that tend to last throughout one's life, to a certain extent throughout childhood, and definitely throughout adulthood. Those characteristics that tend to stay the same over time, and also from one situation to the next situation. And the example I always like to use to explain personality is, imagine a situation where you run into an old friend that you haven't seen for years, maybe 5, 10 years, a long time, and you begin to talk to them, and it occurs to you quickly that, hey, this is the same old Joe that I knew 10 years ago, and he hasn't changed. He's the same way. He's very outgoing. He's very talkative and friendly and enthusiastic, positive sort of person. He hasn't changed a bit. And see, this is an example. What we mean by personality is that Joe's circumstances may have changed a great deal. Maybe he graduated from college and went off and got some, uh, a great job with all these duties and responsibilities, and he's had all these changes. Maybe he got married and had a couple of kids, and he's been through, and now he's a father and a husband, and he's had all these life changes, but it's still the same old Joe. That's what we mean when we're talking about personality, is those things that tend to last in a person even when the circumstances change. So this personality psychology is an important branch in psychology, and I guess one of the reasons why I say it's important is because uh, so many of these disciplines that we've talked about so far this semester, sociology, economics, and even you'll see in sort of social psychology, the social learning kind of theories that we've talked about in this course. All of those different disciplines tend to look at the circumstances that drive a person's behavior. So personality psychology is important as a contrast, as a different alternative perspective that focuses on the inside. So that's one reason why it's a very important perspective. Now, personality research also tends to be joined up with genetic research. The idea here is that this consistency in the way you behave over time and in different situations throughout your life, and this tendency to react to things in the same way all the time, to be, if you're in a situation with new people, you're the type that's, you instantly go quiet, and you feel kind of uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable around strangers. That we call that a shy person. This type of personality research has focused on the brain, and it's focused on the element of sort of this biological source, that these personality traits are rooted not only in sort of the way your brain's wired, but also have some foundation in genetic influence. And so this next highlighted point here is that various types of genetic research show that personality traits have a significant genetic component. Heterabilities are typically between 0.3 and 0.5, can even be higher than that in some circumstances, or some studies, I should say. And so there's a lot there. We'll get into more of the details later. This is kind of an introductory point, but let me say a couple things about that. How do we know that there is a genetic link, that some of the reason why a person is shy or very outgoing is because of the combination of genes that they sort of accidentally inherited from their parents? How do we know that? Well, that comes from research, a branch of research that's called behavioral genetics, that uses techniques like comparing identical twins with non-identical twins, with adopted kids with their adoptive parents versus their biological parents that they didn't grow up around. We'll get into some of these techniques, but they use the techniques have gotten more and more sophisticated over the decades, to where the evidence, even though I'm someone who's trained in sociology and trained to sort of be skeptical of biological or genetic perspectives, I have to admit that the research is quite sophisticated and getting more so every day, and that that there's definitely evidence there that makes someone with my kind of background kind of think, wow, well, maybe we need to take this seriously because the evidence is pretty strong. Anyway, on this next point about heritabilities typically being between 0.3 and 0.5, what a heritability means is what percentage of the variation in a trait is due to that combination of thousands of genes. Each person has roughly 20,000 genes. So you add up the influence of all of those many, many genes. How much of the story does that tell in whatever personality trait you're trying to explain? And as you see here in the PowerPoint slides, it's somewhere between 0.3 and 0.5 for most of these personality traits. So 0.3, 0.5 is the same thing as somewhere between 30% and 50% of whatever trait you're looking at can be explained in terms of that accident of birth of what genetic inheritance that you got from mom and dad. So this is speaking overall, generally speaking, that there's quite impressive data that a significant part of why you act like you do is because of this. It's rooted in this genes, and that it's not typically more than half the story, but it's a significant part of the story, along with all the social factors and circumstances that we've been talking about thus far during the semester. Now, again, we're speaking very generally here about what does this personality research overall, not just in terms of criminal behavior, but just with any psychological trait that you can think of. Whether, again, I keep using this shyness or outgoing type of personality, or someone who's like very, very energetic, very a real go-getter versus somebody who's really relaxed and easygoing, somebody who's easily made nervous or fearful or angry compared to a person who's really calm. So regardless of the psychological trait that you're looking at, we find this heritability to be quite impressive and kind of significant. But then this next point is that the same type of studies show that the environments that siblings share, this is called shared environment, have little influence on traits, while non-shared environment matters more. Now, we kind of touched upon this in class later, or I should say previously, when we were criticizing self-control theory. Self-control theory says that the parenting style of parents is super important for how the kid turns out, and if you don't parent right, then the kid is going to grow up more likely to act like a criminal. So we kind of touched on this before, but let's say this again, that this research divides up your environment, your surroundings, into two parts. Those parts that you and your siblings, your brothers and sisters, share that are the same for you and your brothers and sisters. So if you grew up poor, mom and dad are poor, the whole family's poor, then that's what you call shared environment, because that lack of money is true for you and your siblings in the same way. And then that's in contrast to the other sort of environment that the researchers talk about, non-shared environment, which are those things that happen to you, those circumstances or events that happen in your life that are unique to you and didn't happen to your brothers or your sisters. So say you just by bad luck caught some serious disease, and your siblings didn't, and you had to go through that illness and the struggles of recuperation and recovery. That's non-shared, or also called unique environment. And the shocking thing to me was to learn that this body of research, this discipline, has found that your parents or the things that you and your siblings share together, the things that you have the same parents, the parents basically treat you the same way, anything at all that you share that's the same between you and your siblings, that doesn't have a lot of influence in how you turn out and what your personality is like when you grow up. The non-shared environment, those unique things that happen to you, that don't happen to your siblings. Say you happen to, just by bad luck, sort of fall into a group of kids who are inclined to be delinquent and break the law, and they influence you in that direction, but it doesn't happen to your brothers and sisters. It's just bad luck on your part. Well, that kind of thing is important. It seems to be important, more so than what you and your brothers and sisters all share together. So that, to me, is, if you think about that, that's a pretty profound result that comes out of this research, and one that does cast some doubt on any theories that focus on what you and your brothers and sisters would share together. Poverty, for example, would not end up being important if this line of research is valid, because that's something that all siblings share. And so that, according to this research, doesn't have too much influence on how people turn out. So that's pretty big stuff right there. And again, as you know, my attitude in this class is that if you just absolutely find this stuff unpersuasive and not compelling, hey, I'm just here to tell you what the research that's out there, the different perspectives, different disciplines, and you take from it what you will. I will say that the research is pretty hard to knock holes in a major way, but nevertheless, we'll leave it at that. So this same individual differences research that studies personalities, this is also the area where they study IQ. And IQ is kind of like a personality trait, but is thought to be significantly rooted in the brain, the wiring and the functioning of the brain, like these other personality traits are. But it's kind of considered to be a little bit separate, just that because it's a sort of it's a cognitive thing. It's sort of how you think as opposed to how you behave and how you feel or something. So, and also I guess it's been studied a lot, so it kind of has almost its own area. But you can consider it to be part of this individual differences research. And of course, this is a controversial area, the IQ research, and a lot of people have a lot of problems with it and such. But again, if there's research connected to crime, we want to make sure and cover it. And so to read off this point here, the body of research shows that low IQ predicts common criminality, although the relationship is not strong. So there's a long tradition, or lots of research that's been done over the decades that shows that your typical street criminal tends to score a little lower than the average person on these IQ tests, say around an average of about 90 or something like that, give or take, depending on the study. And that's a pretty solid, reliable finding, although it's not particularly strong. There's not a particularly strong correlation between the two. And so what I want to say about that the relationship is not strong. It's reliable, but it's not super strong. So because there's plenty of evil criminals that are that are the intelligent type. Think of that, the sort of the evil Hannibal Lecter type, highly intelligent serial killer type. Those sorts of people do exist, but more ordinary criminals that may score high on IQ test. We know we've talked a little bit about psychopaths in this class, that they're not necessarily low intelligence. They just are lacking humanity, lacking a conscience. They know what they're doing is wrong. They understand it very well. They're not lacking in understanding. They're just lacking in feelings for other people. So this IQ thing does appear to be a connection there, but it's not a super strong one. And it's not really, I wouldn't say it's a central sort of finding, one that we really have to focus a lot in criminology, because I think it's not, the correlation is not that strong. I would characterize it as being weak to medium at best. The textbook stresses that there's this verbal IQ crime link, and it tends to be stronger than the nonverbal IQ link. And also, Walsh, the author of this textbook, has actually conducted some research where he found that people who score high in nonverbal IQ, but then low in verbal IQ, that has a little bit stronger prediction of that someone will be involved in crime. What do we mean by that? Well, not to get into it too deeply, but in IQ research, they say that there's more than one type of intelligence. There's certain areas that are somewhat different from each other. Verbal IQ refers to being able to, say, read a difficult, paragraph in your textbook that's highly technical and difficult to understand, but you can penetrate that. You can comprehend that. That would be an indication of having a high verbal IQ, or someone who's good with words, right? And has a big vocabulary, for example, that they've picked up along the way because they're good at verbal sorts of skills. As opposed to nonverbal skills, a major type of intelligence, according to the research, that's nonverbal would be, that maybe couldn't read a difficult paragraph and comprehend that very well, but you're someone who is really good at, say, taking apart an automobile and putting it back together, and being a really good mechanic. So you're someone who's good. They call this having good spatial skills, where you can take some object and in your mind be able to rotate it mentally, so you could imagine what it looks like on the bottom or on the back side or on the top. And some people have strong what they call visual spatial skills that makes them a good mechanic or a good engineer, that sort of thing. And that's a different kind of skill than verbal intelligence. So they'll sometimes call that like performance intelligence or visuospatial intelligence. So there's various types of intelligence. We don't need to get into all of that. We're really just kind of scratching the surface in this course. But the point is that that this verbal IQ seems to be more important in predicting crime, and being weak in verbal IQ. And maybe, there's different explanations for why would that be. It might be that people who are verbally skilled tend to be able to get along with other people better and have better communication skills. And if you can express yourself well and communicate well, you may be able to get through difficulties, through disagreements, conflicts, more peacefully, more constructively than somebody who's less verbally gifted. So if someone really struggles with words and they'll lose in a verbal argument with somebody because they're not very good at arguing, they may turn to violence, to a physical way to solve a conflict, and because maybe they have advantages there with physically dominating other people, as opposed to verbally dominating other people through arguments. So anyway, so there's definitely research definitely shows that if you're a person who's a good communicator, that ties in with being sort of socially skilled and good at dealing with other people. Those people tend to be less criminal. Now, one thing I will say about IQ before we close it up for this session is that, getting back to the whole psychopath thing, that this low IQ thing is not going to be as predictive of crime. If we're talking about white collar crime, sophisticated, complex, high level crimes, which are important sorts of crimes that we don't really, focus on in this class really as much as we should, that to commit some of these high level crimes, say a Bernie Madoff scam, scamming a bunch of people in business investments. Well, Madoff is an example of someone who's a very intelligent person who uses his abilities to defraud people and steal from people and trick people. So the IQ is going to be less relevant for high-level, complicated sorts of crimes, which are serious crimes and hurt a lot of people too. Not just the simple crimes we tend to focus on in this class, like a common sort of homicide or rape or robbery with a gun or that kind of stuff that is a little more applicable when we're talking about IQ issues. Anyway, so I'm going to leave it there. Again, if you have any questions, email me those, and if not, we'll see you in the next part 2 of covering Chapter 9. See you then.